All right, let's talk Argos. Are they about to get sold? Stephen Brunt, Sportsnet.ca. Overall good guy. Hello, Stephen.
I like that, his lordship thing. I don't like it as much as Bob will like it, but I do like it.
See, there was a moment I wanted to have this conversation with you off air, but there was when you guys were talking bobsleigh a few weeks ago.
Yes, bobsleigh versus bobsled.
There was, and I know Sportsnet has coverage of it.
Oh, lots.
There was a moment in the interview where Bob goes, "You know what? Lately, I've been watching a lot of bobsleigh. How your head didn't fall off your shoulders in shock."
It was an unexpected sentence to hear. You're correct.
You made that half smirk for a moment, and then you got back into beast mode, and I applaud you, sir.
Mode, yes.
You're a better man than I.
Well, we all know our place.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. What place will the Argos be in 4 years?
Well, people I respect and admire who've been reporting on this story suggest that there is something cooking with MLSE and with BMO Field, and Tim Lewicki, who likes to float trial balloons in public, has certainly been floating this one left, right, and center. So, I would tend to believe there's something cooking here, although, there are a bunch of asterisks attached. You would wonder, why the MLSE ownership would want to get into actually, owning this thing. And, you would wonder about having just invested all that money in Jermaine Defoe and Michael Bradley, why you'd want to mess with your soccer clientele. But it would seem, that both of those things are going to happen or could happen. And, maybe the story here is that the NFL is lurking behind the curtain.
I mean, you hear that a lot. Obviously, you can connect the dots. You can to get to Bon Jovi. From the Argos, 7 degrees of separation between the Argos and Bon Jovi, and then you eventually get to the NFL. But in the here and now, Steve, what's this franchise worth?
Nothing.
Wow.
Well, it isn't. The last guy to make money on the Argos on an operating basis, I believe, was Harry Ornest, who sold it to Bruce McNall, who bought it with stolen money. So, what's that, 1989, 1990, somewhere in there?
Correct.
I can guarantee you no one's made money on an operating basis in the Argos. Now, you can make money on a Grey Cup, and you can especially make money if you get a federally subsidized Grey Cup like David Braley did the last time around, so you can kind of double dip. But, in terms of money in, money out, with the real number of people that are in the stadium, they have a much better TV deal in that league now, and that's going to help them, but Toronto is an expensive place to operate. So, if you're MLSE, you understand that that it's a lost leader, that if you're buying it to keep it alive for some other reason, and there's no real play here in terms of the business, and that's why speculation naturally turns to other stuff.
How cognizant do you think, Stephen, is this group of the stigma of being the people who killed it?
I think and this would go quite a ways back. And I know there are lots of people, including Lord McCowan, who would say this is never, ever going to ever happen. The NFL won't come to Toronto, and they'll come up with all kinds of reasons why it's not going to happen. All I can tell you is that there are a lot of really, really rich people in Toronto, and there are a lot of political operatives in Toronto who have been acting for the last several years very much like it is going to happen. There are plans for stadiums. There are all kinds of scenarios being floated. There are at least two different ownership groups, both of which have the money. So, there are folks out there who think it's going to happen. And again, what I've heard is that quietly the NFL not promising a thing. And they're not going to talk about Buffalo, for instance, because Ralph Wilson is still alive. But they will. They may have an issue in Buffalo. Everybody understands that. But one of the things that they have let people know is that they would rather a solution was found for the Toronto Argonauts, that they don't want the blood of the CFL and the Argonauts on their hands if they move into the market.
See, from the NFL standpoint, is the easy way through some of these franchise situations eventually moving the Bills and then expansion franchising in London?
Yeah, probably. Like the easy thing with the Bills, again, and I'm sure there's people in Buffalo who say that no, this is going to happen. But eventually you're going to need a stadium built in Buffalo, and it's going to be very hard to get a stadium built in Buffalo. It's a small market. It's slightly on the rebound, but it's a small place. It would be a ridiculous expenditure. $1 billion stadium in a market that size, where people right now pay the lowest ticket prices in the NFL to go to games. It is a working class market, and that's who goes to the games. And that's great. It's part of what makes Buffalo great and part of what makes going to a game there great. But, if you're going to finance something bigger and more flashy, you're going to need a lot more cash and you need a lot bigger market. So you move the Bills up the road to Toronto, where they've already, in theory, put in a stake. See, again, if you want to get into that whole theory, that also would explain why the Bills and Toronto series is continuing. because there's no other reason for it to continue. No one seems to particularly want it or care about it, and yet they renewed it for another 5 years. That the optics would be, and maybe the reality would be, that that's the bill saying this is part of our territory. And if this team, on the death of Ralph Wilson, has to move from Orchard Park to somewhere in Toronto, we wouldn't really be leaving a market. We'd just be relocating within a market, sort of like going from Pasadena to Anaheim or something.
Stephen Brunt here on Tim and Sid. The other issue that immediately gets brought up, and I'm seeing a lot of TFC fans at Tim and Sid who have gone down this road very quickly. So what with BMO? So you get the purchase. What are you going to do now, Steve? I don't know if you heard Lewicki last night at a business dinner. I forget which one. And Tim can't help himself when he's got a crowd like that, so he usually throws a couple nuggets out there. They're thinking English Premier League-ish style renovations to BMO is. On the surface, I love that kind of look. A covered crowd. I think it all works, but like when you're bringing in a CFL team, does it really work?
Well, that's he says it can. Now I would be. I understand why the soccer guys are skeptical, and they should be. Number one, because you're sharing a pitch, and football does tear up natural grass, and you have to have natural grass. You're not going back to field turf, not with Jermaine Defoe. Not if you're going to spend that money on him, or on Bradley, or on the team in general. You're not going to suddenly go back to a surface that guys don't want to play on. You would have to come up with some kind of a solution for the end stands, where they would move back for footballs to accommodate a CFL end zone, and then be able to move back for soccer so you can keep the intimacy. That's going to cost a fortune. And then there's the lines on the field, which I know to non-soccer people say, well, who cares? But if you've ever watched if you like soccer, and if you watched a game played on a field where there are football lines, even faded football lines, it's not a very satisfying experience. And and the fact is, MLSE is going to have, even if they bought the Argos, they'd have a way bigger stake and way more games in soccer than they would in the CFL. So why not service the thing that's more important to you? But again, unless there is another agenda, and that's, to me, again, the only way that any of this makes sense.
Steve, there's a possibility here. Renovations to BMO could cost more than the Argos.
Yeah, they will. Oh, no, guaranteed. Again, I'm not sure what value the Argos have, aside from sentimental.
Well, no, but let's break this down. $80.
Well, it's just...
Okay, higher, $90.
They were bought out of bankruptcy by David Braley and, by Howard Sokolowski and David Cinnamon, but with David Braley as their backer. Because they've changed hands because people have thrown the keys on the table. That's how the Argos have changed hands the last couple of times. So, this is not a slight to the CFL. It's just the truth in this marketplace. And even with the better TV money, it's just they weren't putting a lot of people in the building. Would they be better off in BMO? Guaranteed. I'm sure as long as it didn't rain. I think you'd get 20,000 people there, or 25,000 people there if they expanded the place, and that'd be fine. But can you justify that expansion based on 25,000 people for CFL? No.
Stephen Brunt here on Tim and Sid. Steve, final question. We appreciate the time. The state of the franchise for the Toronto Blue Jays will be taking shape this evening at Rogers Centre at 6:30 Eastern. I like where you're going with this already, Steve. The tone of your voice, I can read it. If you were a season ticket holder, Steve, and had an unfettered question for the dais tonight, what would you ask them?
Well, I guess I would ask about, I would ask about grass. I would ask about the 5-year contract limit and whether it makes sense in the new environment. I would ask, I wouldn't ask what are you going to do this year because.
But if you had one question, Steve, what's the question? If you had to limit it to one, what's the most pressing thing if you were a season ticket holder?
Well, thinking that someone would actually answer it, sodium pentothal.
Yeah, regardless of the fact they're going to dance around and not answer it, what would you like to ask?
I think I would like to know how much money they have to spend this year.
Great question.
But barring a truth serum, somebody slipping truth serum into Paul Beeston's beer, you're not going to get that.
No. But I'm sure the NHL contract might be brought up tonight. Let's be honest, right?
You mean that the robbing Peter to pay Paul theory?
Well,
Yeah, I don't think so.
Someone may go.
I don't think that's the way it works.
I don't know, but maybe someone might go down the road. I don't know. It's just it is considering how last offseason went, Steve, and how this offseason has gone, and the money that's been changing hands in other parts of this company. I don't know. I think some fans might start thinking it. But
the one thing I would bring up there is, aside from Tanaka, and I don't think there's any scenario they're getting Tanaka no matter what. What have they? Who is the player that has changed hands this offseason who you think they should have had?
That's a good point.
Because I can't think of one, and I'm lukewarm on Jimenez. And
you know what? Any name I could throw at you, Steve, it would have been through trade.
Yes,
any name.
We don't know, and we don't know what's out there through trade.
Yeah,
and we're not at spring training yet, so let's wait till February, and then we can all pass judgment.
Stephen, we appreciate you always on this show because you're way smarter than me. Maybe not Tim. You're way smarter than me.
What happened to him anyway?
Tim's on vacay. Tim's the smartest guy in the place. He skipped town for 8 days. He's back tomorrow.
Yes, that's right. He's in Sunny Climes. I know.
Sorry, Steve. We got to go. Take care, brother. Stephen Brunt. Love him.